All right, this is Desiree, our guest speaker, and I will let her introduce herself.
Okay.
And you should have everything set.
No problem, thanks. Hi everyone, my name is Desiree Baccus, and I work at NASA Ames Research Center in Silicon Valley. I have worked for NASA for about 15 years at several of their different centers, currently at Ames. And one of the reasons that I'm here tonight is because they asked if I would do a presentation on NASA on the Air. So we all know what POTA is, we all know what SOTA is. We modeled ourselves right after, you know, that very popular, very well-designed event. And so we took the mantle, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about NASA on the Air. And I am one of the co-chairs for this year for the NASA on the Air events. Okay, so like I said, I am the co-chair for NASA on the Air. It's our amateur radio special event, and my co-chair is Jayant Ramashikan. He's from Johnson. He's actually a contract. He works for a contract, and he's the CEO of a contract out there at Johnson. And so each year, NASA's NOTA has been going on for a couple of years, but each year we have a different person lead the charge. So I was just going to tell you a little bit about myself. And so for me, I am kind of relatively new ham for most. So I got mine about 7 years ago when I was 42. It was later in life that I got into amateur radio. My kids were kind of getting ready to leave the nest. And we had moved up to the Bay Area in Silicon Valley, and we were doing these long commutes into Ames Research Center. So we were, I don't know if you guys know the area, but we lived out in Gilroy, and it's about an 1.5 to 2 hour commute one way. And so my children at that time were old enough to know that we had emergency preparedness stuff in the house. But our oldest son was a Marine, wanted to be a Marine since birth. So he was always our, in case of an emergency, lean on Colton. Well, Colton joined the Marine Corps, and we didn't have that as a resource. And so I wanted to make sure that our children that were still at home, the two younger boys, knew what resources we had in our local area, since it was a new area. And so I joined the CERT team, and that's how I kind of got into it. The first one of the days in CERT, which is a community emergency response team, we had 1 day of amateur radio. And so I was just hooked instantly. I knew that's what I wanted to know more about and do more about. And it was only in like the emergency preparedness side of the house that they kind of showed us. But I got my license first. And then soon after me, I roped my husband into the hobby. And it's just kind of been on fire for both of us since then. So for us, just like a lot of other amateur radio operators, we are members of many clubs. And so we tend to get a lot of different things from different types of clubs. So in one club, we might learn a lot of antenna shootouts or have real good mentors in the technical fields. Another one might be a really great social club where we really made strong friendships and, they're like family. And then other ones were really community based, where we would do community outreach like you guys with your guys's events for your community that you guys are doing the community service for. We had the Garlic Valley Amateur Radio Club, but we did the Garlic Festival there in Gilroy. And then we also had there's lots of bike races and things like that out in Big Sur. And so we would kind of do those things. And then of course the local parades and things. So we had lots of those. How NOTA got started is actually this gentleman here. His name's Rob Suggs, and he is from Marshall Space Flight Center. And he had this wonderful idea years ago about trying to get each of the centers has their own amateur radio club. And we were really just kind of silos in our area. And so you really only did things in your local communities and things like that around the centers. And so since NASA is an agency that's across the United States, obviously, and the ISS, we wanted to do something more collaborative that got us all working together and doing something really fun. So like I said, Rob Suggs got the idea to start doing something together that we could do with public outreach that could get us all together. So he was kind of the brains and the idea behind all that. And he really started that back in 2018 was our first one. And then every year we've done a little bit since. So 2018, there was a lot of events, special events. So with NOTA, it's a year-long event, but then we commemorate certain milestones. So either the current milestones that we're achieving today, like, this last weekend with James Webb and all of our stuff there. We just had a James Webb thing, but then we also do the 50th anniversaries of all the Apollo missions and things like that. So some years we've only done one event, as you can see, and then other years we've done a lot more. This year we have a ton. So there's that. What is NOTA? It's, like I said, it's a 1 year, it's oriented goal it's for just building camaraderie between the clubs and also really just growing amateur radio as a hobby for people that don't even know about it or maybe remember it when they were a kid, because it's totally changed. So what you thought you knew about it, it's not what it is today. And there's many different facets of it. So a lot of people that, I did that, but I got bored. There's so many different ways. So that's kind of how it is. And with everyone, we've just been able to promote and celebrate and really do public outreach with children, people my age group, people that have been in it for years. So it's been a lot of fun. So for us, we are the NASA Ames Amateur Radio Club. We are NA6MF. That is our station call sign. I am the station trustee for that group. Years past, I have been the vice president of that club as well. I did step out of that role. I still am the station trustee, but I stepped out of the vice president role when I started working for the Office of the Center Director. So that took a little bit more of my time. This is the map of all the centers. As you can see, we have quite a few centers. So I just wanted to share that we have 10 centers. We have 2 facilities, and we also have the ISS that's participating in NASA on the Air this year. And so the ISS doesn't do a lot of stuff, but they do a lot of public outreach when they are going to be on the air. So I just wanted you to know that you can go anytime to our website, and that is the nasaontheair.wordpress.com to find out who's, transmitting, where we're at, and at all these things. So I want to tell you a little bit about NASA Ames. NASA Ames, our core competencies at Ames is all these fun things. So we do air traffic management, so for all the drones, and trying to get all of the laws in place for the UAS and the NAS. Our entry systems, anything that goes into space and it has to heat up the heating tiles or anything like that on any spacecraft around the world, we have the ArcJet facility that tests that to make sure that it's viable and things like that. So that's one of the great things at NASA Ames. We also have the advanced computing IT systems there. I don't know if anybody here is really into computers, like my husband, but we also host the eRoot server. So there's root servers that hold up the internet, and we host the eRoot server at NASA Ames. So it's kind of a big deal. There's lots of other stuff that we do, but I wanted to bring your attention to a couple of things. So if you look up here at the very top, that is our huge wind tunnel that you can actually put a full-size plane in, and we can test new plane technologies and things like that. But the fun thing that I wanted to show you is at the leading edge of that big square. It doesn't look very big from this picture because you're obviously looking from way up high down very low, but it is massive. And so every day at lunch, there's a big group of people at NASA Ames that go out there every day and put on rollerblades, and they have a hockey match. And then there's plenty of people that are rooting for whichever team. So that is just random fun that we do there. And then this is NASA Research Park, which Google is reskinning the Hangar 1 or the dirigible hangar there which a lot of people know as a definite thing. And then the bubbles down at the bottom, that's the ArcJet facility that I was telling you about for the entry systems. So this picture, that's black, I see, is we have our visitor center is at the Chabot Science Center in Oakland, California. So it's not actually on NASA Ames as a federal center. They really try to lock that down. And so it's really hard to kind of get visitors on there. We do have ways and mechanisms to do that for educational purposes for classrooms and things like that, but it's kind of fewer and far between. But there is a fantastic visitor center at the Chabot Science Center up in Oakland, California, if you ever get the opportunity to go there. The other thing that's really cool about NASA Ames Research Center for me and the emergency preparedness side of the house is we have this really cool DART center. It's a disaster assistance and rescue team center there at NASA Ames. And what it is it's real close to the bay. As you can see past the picture, all that blue is actually the bay area, the bay encroaching on the very back of our property. And what this is down structures that we have in place, old planes, old buses, cargo, railroads, structures. So that way people from around the United States, all these emergency preparedness, different groups from around the United States come to NASA Ames, and we teach them how to do cribbing and how to do extractions and how to best, most effectively search for bodies and people so we can get to people quicker. And that means more rescues, and that means more people alive after a major event. So this could be after a emergency that's a natural disaster, or it could be a man-made disaster. So there's a lot of training that goes on there. And we host a lot of different really cool groups that come through, including like, the bomb sniffing dogs or human cadaver sniffing dogs or, things like that. So it's just really fascinating. And the technology that NASA gets to then turn around with our engineers, create stuff that it's like, oh, I wish we had this. Okay, we're on it. Let's try. And so it's really been kind of a fascinating thing that we have. So I just wanted to show you this slide. You're going to get this one twice. So don't feel like you have to write it down. And we've also given you guys a presentation, but we have past events that we've done already this year, which is on the lower part, but the top part is everything that we have in front of us. So we still have the Artemis launch. Obviously that keeps getting postponed. So we don't really have a date yet for that. It's like TBD. But that's kind of like the James Webb Telescope was too. So with NASA and their current missions, oftentimes we have a target date and we just know it's going to slide. When we get to something and it actually goes the day that it's supposed to launch, we're shocked. So yeah, so I'm just saying, it's amazing. So, so we're very flexible with these. The ones for the anniversaries are much easier because we know they've already happened. We know when they happened and we just do it on that day. So that makes it very easy. For us, we have all of our NASA centers and all of our groups then get on the air, and it's all bands, it's all of the centers. And so it gets kind of a bit crazy at that point, but it goes real fun. So I just wanted to tell you about a little bit about each of the NASA centers and kind of give you their call signs, because you guys can hunt for those call signs or keep an eye out for those call signs or put them even in some of your rigs. And then they can say, hey, guess who's on? And then you can catch them. So the whole idea is when you're on a NASA event that we're doing, all the centers are on. When you make a contact, you get a certificate and you get points. And so for every contact on every band, you get more points. And so every time you get points at the end of the year, with as many points as you have collected, then you print off a commemorative, certificate that says you're 500 of, 50 million thousand, that was my number, because I was not working my call sign, I was working in A6MF. So, but I'll tell you a little bit about us. So as you can see, we also do the Summits on the Air and Parks on the Air activations. So this is one of our amateur radio operators doing Parks on the Air activation for NOTA. So he was out there in Oregon. And so that was a lot of fun. So for NASA, NASA Ames is actually one of the 4 original NACA centers before it turned into NASA. And so NACA is an initialism, right? And it's pronounced by the individual letters, NACA. We don't really call it NACA. And then there's NASA, which is an acronym that we just run it all together and make a word out of it. And so, but it is one of the first original 4 centers. So Langley was the first center. Glenn in Cleveland was the second. Dryden was the was the third, and we were the 4th center. So NASA Armstrong, this is another center. This is actually where Carl and I met when we were working at NASA Armstrong years ago. He was born and raised out there. So, for me, I grew up in the Central Valley, and it was far and removed from me, kind of like it is for you guys out here in Colorado. So when I got the opportunity to work for NASA, I was over the moon ecstatic and jumping on couches and freaking out. And here is a gentleman that has literally watched most of all of the shuttles that landed at NASA Armstrong from his front yard and wasn't as impressed. So, yeah, I won him over. He is now impressed. Okay, so that is NASA Armstrong. It used to be called NASA Dryden Flight Research Center when they changed the name a couple of years back. That was a lot of fun. I got to do that too. A lot of paperwork. It is. So that is very interesting. Yes, NASA Armstrong, or NASA Dryden Flight Research Center, is a bubble within Edwards Air Force Base. So they're a tenant on their facility, which at NASA Ames is the exact opposite. We own the land and the military is a tenant on our property. So we own Moffett Field. Yeah.
NAS Moffett.
Yeah. Yep. So that's actually it. And then if you've ever seen the opening scenes of I Dream of Jeannie, the building at the very first cut scenes that you're watching Major Nelson, where he walks into where he works, that's actually the front doors of the main building at NASA Dryden or NASA Armstrong. So that's that picture there with the plane in front of it. You might recognize that. It's also under restricted airspace of R2508. And so they do that when you're going, if you've ever driven from, through California to get to Vegas, there is this very long stretch of nothingness desert out there. And that is restricted airspace of R2508 because we test, planes out there that haven't ever been flown before. They're all hypothetical. Planes go down. You don't want to do that over people that are living there. So it's very restricted of being able to build out there and things like that. So obviously there is China Lake that's out there, right? But that's far and removed from us. So we've got our own little corridor, and that's the DoD side, and they have a bigger corridor for us, which we all play in the same space. So it is what it is. The other thing that I wanted to say is this random information that you get with me, right? So I wanted to show you in this picture, it's not the actual pink boots, but there are pink boots up there with pink daisies on them. And the reason that I did that is because I wanted to bring to your attention this one story. So I don't know if anyone has heard of Bill Dana, but he was a real famous, or at least he was famous to everyone at Dryden, one of our flight pilots, our test pilots. And so he was just, obviously this real manly man and everything's real good. And so they always wore these jumpsuits with these black shoes. And you can see they had the tan pilot suits and their helmets. Well, he was getting ready to finish flying the X-24B research flight. It was like they were retiring the plane. So NASA was like, oh, we want you to have these beautiful outfits. We want you to have white shoes. We want you in dark outfits. And Bill Dana was like, dude, I am not wearing white shoes. They are not manly. I'm not doing it. And so the flight crews that get all of their life equipment, together, all of their flight suits, they give them what they give them. And that's what it is. So one of the guys in the flight suit area they spray painted these boots, fluorescent pink, put red daisy decals all over them, these white daisy decals all over them. And then when they came to give them their outfits, they gave him the pink boots with the white daisies. And then he just looked at him, gave him a nice sturdy look. And they said, it's okay. We still gave you the big black boots that, he always wore. And to give him credit, he wore the pink boots with the white daisies. He did huge interviews for NASA. And he's wearing these pink boots and so now it's like this total joke. When people dress up for Halloween, they dress up in the whole pilot outfit, pink boots. So now if you ever see a pilot with pink boots, they must have worked there. So there you go. So NASA Glenn is out in Cleveland, Ohio. They do a lot of their core competencies is air breathing propulsion, the air breathing propulsion systems, communication technology and development, space propulsion, cryogenic fluid management, power, energy, storage, and conversion, amongst other things. Random fact again, is they filmed Marvel Studios, chose the facility there at Sandusky to film the Avengers. So if you're checking around that, if you ever go there, you might be able to match those two up. Definitely have your kids watch the Avengers before you go and visit the center. And it'll be like, wait a minute, I think I've seen this place. Okay, so the next thing is it's the only place in the world that can test a full-size spacecraft for all conditions from launch and flight in one facility. So that's really kind of a neat thing. The other thing that's really cool about NASA Glenn is their zero gravity research facility. And so that's where they test all of their vertical vacuum chamber microgravity experiments, including getting our astronauts ready for space. And it really replaced, which I'm sure everybody remembers, the vomit comet. It replaced that. We retired that, and now we have the zero gravity research facility. So that's one of the very cool things at NASA Glenn. NASA Goddard is in Greenbelt, Maryland, and it actually has developed more planetary instruments than any other institution on Earth. So that's kind of a really cool thing. Goddard was also NASA's first space flight center, for anyone that's really into trivia. The other thing that I wanted to show you is on the lower right-hand side of that screen, those are actually the ISS amateur radios. So one is a Kenwood D710E, and the other one is a Kenwood D710GA. So those are the two that are up there, and they support 2-meter and 70 centimeter operations. So what they started doing was they started bringing amateur radio up onto the NASA station as a backup for communications. If anything went down, if there were problems, you could still communicate. And so what ended up happening is they stood up the ARIS, which is the amateur radio group, and they started doing public outreach with it and really reaching out for kids to talk to astronauts, ask them questions, all through amateur radio and stuff like that. And so it's been a really neat tool, one, to get people interested in amateur radio, but two, they're so excited about NASA. And then we've also gotten some really great, our astronauts, we always have a couple of astronauts at least that go on each mission that have to get their license. So it also, if they get their license, it puts them a little bit above the next guy, right? So it's like, well, I could be that communication backup, and somebody's over here going, well, I don't have it. Well, if you're this close, that might set you over the edge. So a lot of people do have that, even in our upper management and stuff like that. So, but we'll get to that. So the next one is JPL. JPL is actually, everyone knows JPL. Everyone's heard of JPL with NASA, but it's actually not a center. It's actually a federally funded research and development center, and it's managed by Caltech for NASA. So it's one of our facilities. Very awesome facilities, but that's what it is. And so they really specialize, obviously, in robotic Earth and space missions, planetary exploration, and space-based astronomy and things like that. So they have the space flight operations facility there at JPL. And so we really refer to that as the nerve center for all of our missions that are out into space. And so really it's kind of become lovingly known as the center of the universe. So that's what we call them. Yeah. The other thing that's really cool to know about JPL, also in California, if you're ever around and you're ever going to be going on a trip to JPL, once a year, JPL opens its doors to visitors, and not all centers do that. And I'm telling you, it is the coolest campus. It's like going onto a university campus. It's like they're so open, and they have rovers running around, and they have all sorts of really cool things. It's neat for adults. It's neat for kids. It's just a really neat experience. And it's called Ticket to Explore is what they call it. And so if you go to www.jpl.nasa.gov/social, you could find more out about that. Okay, so the next one is W5RRR, which is Johnson, which they love to call W5 rocket, rocket, rocket. If you ever hear them on the radio, they say it about 1 million times, and it turns into a total joke, but we absolutely love them. They're great. They're out of Houston, Texas, and they are lovingly referred to there in Houston as the Space City. And so they've really taken on that moniker back in, I believe, in 1967. Obviously, everybody knows Houston as their call sign Houston or Mission Control. And so that's them. But the other cool thing about making the connection with Houston is that they have the neutral buoyancy laboratory, that big, huge pool that the astronauts get to play in that makes it do fake missions so they can kind of get used to being weightless and do all those things. And they can actually run 2 missions at the same time. So they can have astronauts and a whole team on one side of the pool, and they can have astronauts and a whole team doing a whole different simulation on the other side of the pool. So that gets used quite a bit, but that pool is huge. It's 202 feet long, it's 102 feet wide, and it's 40 feet deep. Yeah, 6 million gallons of water. Talk about a water bill. So there's that one. The next one is Kennedy. It's K1KSC. They're on Merritt Island out in Florida on the Space Coast. They get a whole coast. They don't get a city. They have the VAB. I know everyone has seen the VAB. They've heard of the VAB. It's the Vehicle Assembly Building. And the cool thing about that building, when you're watching a launch or something, it's that huge building in the background. It's got the huge meatball, and there's like little tiny ant people sitting up front. Well, it's actually the 4th largest structure in the world by volume. So, I mean, you talk about it actually can generate its own weather system inside. Not kidding. True?
Yeah.
True.
It rains
inside the VAB. Not kidding. The other interesting thing about Kennedy Space Center, which blows my mind to think about, is it's only 6 miles. Did I get this right? 6 miles wide and 34 miles long. So if you think about that, right, that's smaller than Denver. I mean, that's larger than Denver. Denver is smaller than that one center. That blows my mind. Anyway, okay. So that's just a weird fact. And then the other thing about Houston that's really cool if you ever get there is they have a visitor center, and they are the only center that has a shuttle on display, and that's Atlantis. And it's fantastic. Like, we've worked at NASA. We've seen the shuttles when they've come in. We've seen shuttle landings. We've gotten to be up against them up close. But being at the visitor center was so much better because you can be so close to it that you could touch it. You can totally be around it. When you're working at NASA, you can go out to it if you're a lucky one to get a lottery ticket and win, which I have. Woohoo! But you can't be near it. It's got to cool off. It's got all these it's got all this stuff that's bleeding off of it. They're pumping air through it to get all of the stuff off of it. So you're pretty far away from it. You're on scaffolding, that kind of a thing. But when we were able to go to the visitor center, we had just this wonderful experience while we were there. And at that time, Charlie Bolden was actually the administrator, and I actually got to meet him at that time. So that was really cool. And then for a couple of years after that, I'd met him several other times, but that was my very first time meeting him. I was new to NASA. I was like, oh, starstruck. Like I did not care about, movie stars or anything like that, but Charlie Bolden, and he just like go up to him and say hi. I'm like, never. And so he totally was like, dude, my wife works for you. Blah, blah. He's like, hey, thanks for working for me. I was like, you're welcome, sir. It was awesome. So, but I've worked for several other administrators now, so still a little awestruck. Okay, the next one is WG4NJA, which is Langley out in Hampton, Virginia. Johnson Space Center leads NASA's human space-related scientific and medical research programs. So that's basically what they do. They do areas of medicine, energy, transportation, agriculture, our communications, and electronics. The other thing that's really cool about Langley, everyone has seen Hidden Figures, and that is really about the Langley Center and our African-American female computers, which, back in the day. And so really cool history, really amazing people, women that really have done some amazing mathematical equations before we had physical computers. They were women that sat there and did all these calculations. Blows my mind. So that's really neat. So that's from the Langley Center. And then the interesting thing about the Hidden Figures movie is in November of 2020, NASA actually launched some satellites after each of the women in that movie. And so there is a satellite named Dorothy, there is a satellite named Mary, and there is one for Catherine that are out there that you can go and ping. The other thing that's really neat too is on the moon, on the far side of the moon, we have Vaughn Crater for Dorothy Vaughn in her honor, which is really neat. Blows my mind. So, I mean, when you watch the movie and then you think, you're a part of the moon now, that's just, I don't know of any more honor. I don't know any administrator that got that. So that's pretty good. So that was pretty neat. So, and these women were just, even in their, not just in their work lives, but in their personal lives too. So like Mary Jackson, which blows me away, right? Here she is, this brilliant woman, all this, really in-depth work that she's doing. She's there morning to night. She's always around. But for 30 years, she was also a Girl Scout troop leader. So it's like she's been running the troops in her area and the whole night. And it's like, how did you have time? Like, I don't have any excuse. So that's what I think of when people are like, how do you do it all? Well, she did. I'm good. So the next one is Marshall and N4SA. This is on so like we have the Denver Federal Center out here. Redstone Arsenal is the same kind of thing where they have various tenants on Redstone Arsenal out there for the Department of the DoD, Department of Justice, and NASA. And so that's where they're located out there in Huntsville, Alabama. The other thing that you might find interesting is, remember the 1980s movie like Space Camp? I think everyone might remember that really horrible movie if you watched it again, but I still love it. Okay, so I still want to go to space camp and then actually go to space. Never going to happen, but yeah, so that really bad movie, we actually have the real space camp out there. And so what we actually do is we provide residential and educational programs for children and adults, just saying, on themes such as space exploration, aviation, and robotics. So that's a really neat thing that we have out there. And it's still going on. So Stennis is our next one, N5SSC. Stennis is out in Hancock County, Mississippi. It's on the banks of the Pearl River, right by the Louisiana border. And they test the RS-25 engines and stages that will help power NASA's new SLS systems. So my husband, sorry, put you on the spot. He before he became a communications engineer and computer network architect, was going to say God, but I don't want to give you such a big head. He actually was a welder on the rocket site up there at NASA Dryden when he first started. And so he was a welder and things like that. And so for us going to Stennis, which we have not done yet, it's one of the centers we haven't been to, would be just a real blessing and really, really fun. So even for us who have been in it for 15 years, there's still things out there that we want to do, markers we want to hit, places we want to see. And so this is one that I would love just to watch him, like a little kid in a candy store, be able to go and kind of do. But they have quite the facility out there. And so the facility out there is a little over 13,000 acres, which obviously it's a huge center. But beyond that, they have 125,000 more acres that go around it. And that's to buffer the zone, protecting against the noise and power of large rocket engines and stage tests that they do. So that's what he wants to go see. So, but that's how it protects the rest of the community out there. So that's really a neat center. You talk about a beautiful center. Wallops is actually not a center. It's, again, a facility of ours. And it is out in Wallops Island in Virginia. And it is just this absolutely gorgeous island. It's very hard to get to, even for people that work at NASA. Carl's worked there, knows everybody. Hasn't taken me, but whatever. So he actually got to work there, and years ago he was the network lead for standing up the Global Hawk missions, and Global Hawk was being flown out of Wallops, and then he also had to stand up the network out in Guam so they could do their tropospheric research and studies out there. So yeah, I got to see beautiful pictures. Really want to go. I'm just saying. But they conduct a lot of research out there using suborbital vehicles, aircraft, scientific balloons, and sounding rockets. So obviously, hooking up a little APRS thing to one of their balloons would be very awesome, and I would love to make some contacts on it. So I still have hopes. We'll see what happens. But that is Wallops. That's the crew out there. We also have White Sands, which is also another facility of ours. It's out in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and it's real close to the border with Mexico. And so it is actually a facility that's run by Johnson, and they served always as our backup as a landing site if, because of weather or something, we couldn't land at Armstrong or back east. They would also have this as a backup shuttle landing site. And they also do test the experimental planes out there. So a lot of our videography teams and things like that go out there to do really neat, some of the really cool picture shots that you see NASA is famous for. They come from White Sands. And then, of course, everyone loves the ISS, which is the ARIS program, which is the amateur radio on the International Space Station. That's our ARIS program. Right now, Expedition 67 is up there, and these are the astronauts that have their license. So 2 of them are from the United States, and 1, I believe, is from Italy. So basically, all this says is this year I was really excited because ARRL and the FCC has given us, the FCC has given us authorization as the station trustee to be able to grant approval for remote stations to be able to do things like NOTA. So of course I'm the station trustee and I'm also remote. So that happened. So Ames is doing quite well because of all of our remote stations. So that's a little more paperwork, but a lot more fun. So that's pretty exciting. I just wanted to show you this. This is actually a little snippet of past things. So this on the right-hand side, you can see is what you would look at when you're going to the NOTA site. You could say, oh, the last upload that they uploaded their logs was on this time. If you click on the call sign, it actually goes to our websites for each of the stations and each of the areas. If you click on the names of the station, then it goes to the Ames site, the Ames website. So if you want to get spooled off in a rabbit hole of information, this is a great place to start. But the other cool thing about that is it also tells you where you're at in the lineup, how many times you have it, so you can go to your participant login information. But there's all this stuff. And then at the end, this is an old certificate, but this is basically what it looks like at the end of the year. So you can see your total score points. He made 16 contacts, and what your leader position was 29 out of 18,619. So, I mean, it's kind of fun, but that's what it's all about. Again, these are all of the events that have happened in the past and that are coming up in our near future. So obviously the very next one we're hoping is the Artemis launch. I am personally super excited about this. And so I have my flags and banners ready, and my poor husband is just going to have to suck it up. Okay, the next one after that is going to be our STS 86. Let's say 86. Of course, I don't have it on here and it's covered up by the thing. Yep, 86. It's our 25th anniversary of that mission. And so that one, let's see, it was the 20th flight of Atlantis. The other thing that was interesting about this that people might remember was the female astronaut there in the corner. She was supposed to do the moonwalk. And so everyone was looking forward to that. But when she got up there and she docked with Mir, because it was a Mir docking mission, she couldn't fit into their spacesuits because it wasn't ever thought about. Like we didn't think about that. And when she got up there, it was like, well, that's not safe. So then she had to trade out with somebody else. So she missed her opportunity to do an actual spacewalk out in space. So that was totally a bummer. But we still got to do the very first spacewalk between the Russians and us. And then everything that's going on with Russia today, that's the other thing that I wanted to bring up with this, is that it's very interesting because politically it's very charged. But in space and in the ISS, there is peace. And we work together. The agency, it's like it's separate from all the political turmoil, and that's still going strong. So that collaboration on that space, they agree to disagree. We don't talk about that. We work together in order to do science and to do missions and to support one another and to fix each other's stuff. So when our side of the ISS is leaking, everyone goes to the Russian side and we figure out what the problem is, we fix it. If the Russian side has a leak because a marble hit the center, hit the ISS, it has to be fixed. And there is great collaboration with all agencies. And it's not just Russia, but it's with all countries. It is really, really remarkable. So we weren't sure how that was going to go. I was a little, kind of worried about that myself, but it really has been working out. So I'm hoping that will continue. The next one after that, we're going to do Cassini, the 25-year anniversary of Cassini. And it took 7 years for Cassini to launch from here to there. On all of my slides, for all of the event slides, at the bottom, there are links to some really cool NASA videos that tell you all about them. And trust me, you don't want me to go on forever because you guys are going to fall asleep in here. But if you guys, I've given the presentation, they will upload it. Like I said, if you want to go down a rabbit hole of information, there's tons of links and videos. You'll be there for days. And obviously our big one that we're going to culminate the end of the event is the last Apollo mission, Apollo 17. And that's going to be December 7th through the 19th. And that will be the 50th anniversary of that mission. So that's going to be a really big one for us, but that will pretty much close out the NASA on the Air events for this year. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is, so like I said, amateur radio is a huge thing at NASA. So in a lot of places, you work at Lockheed, you work at, different these centers and different facilities. And yeah, you might know another ham, or you might have even a club, but at NASA, it's a big deal. So even our associate administrator, Bob Cabana, I got to meet him and talk to him about NOTA as we were at some conference. And we both were talking about, his time on the ISS and the contacts that he made and that I'm running NOTA and how cool that is. And I'm like, well, you can make some contacts for us. That would be really cool, that kind of thing. So, I mean, it's just really, and there's so many of them out there. So there's a lot of support for it. There's a lot of camaraderie for it. And the cool part about it is it's not just the astronauts. It's flight line mechanics. It's secretaries. It's, astrophysicists. You're working all together to do field day. And you're like, oh, I've been working with you. We're great friends. We've been going out to lunch. We've been hanging out. And you're like, yeah, what do you do? And you're like, oh, yeah, I'm a so-and-so. And oh, I'm a so-and-so. And you're like, well, that's the only time this would, be in the same pool. So, I mean, it's just really hilarious because you don't even think about it until, 3 years down the line, you're like, oh, so you're a PhD doctor for, nice. Let me tell you what I've done. Not so much. So the other cool thing that we've gotten to do was at the Space Symposium here, you guys have this huge, wonderful Space Symposium that we all come from all over the United States for every year out there in Colorado Springs. And we won in one of our CubeSats, obviously big for amateur radio, was inducted this last year into the Hall of Fame. And so one of the cool things that I got to do was I got to meet Elwood Agassiz and Bob Twiggs and Jordi Pugsari. And so Bob Twiggs and Jody Pugsari are there with their medals. They're at the Broadmoor accepting their award, and that is their award there in the center. But the one I want to tell you is Bob Twiggs is the best storyteller ever. So if you ever get the opportunity to hear this man speak, drop everything and go. You will not regret it. He is so funny and engaging and eloquent, and it's hilarious. And then so Jordy gets up and he's like, I swear, they're bantering off each other like best friends, right? And so that's why they're laughing and carrying on. But the interesting thing is when I got to meet Jordy and I was standing off to the side, I'm like, dude, I'm an amateur radio. I love chasing CubeSats. This is awesome. I work at NASA. My husband did a CubeSat presentation. I had to go and beg them to let me have a little CubeSat. That's the one that they, for life or limb, let us check out so we could take it so he could do his presentation. It was the coolest thing. And I'm telling him all this, and he's like, here I am. I'm fangirling all over him, right? And he turns around and he cuts me off. And he's fangirling all over me. He's like, you're an amateur radio operator? Oh my God, let me tell you this. And he's like, oh my gosh, when we started this, so Bob Twiggs and him are one's from Stanford and one's from Cal Poly, and they're two different professors. And they're like, hey, let's get all this, make a communication satellite. Let's get it as small as we can. Okay. So they got this like Beanie Babies box, and they're like, yeah, let's make our kids figure out how to do this. They're never going to be able to do it. Give them something they can't do. Years in the making, after 5 or 6 years, all these different, iterations of these different classes at these top schools, they figured it out. They got it to work. And so then they went, of course, to NASA, and they went all around. They tried to get it to fly. And NASA's like, dude, you are not flying on our plane. Ain't happening. And so they're like, well, we're going to make it happen. Where can we get it flown from? I know, if we go to Russia and we give them money, they'll let us fly anything. Sure enough, it was no big deal, right? So they got their money. They saved all their money. All the kids raised all the funds at all these colleges. They saved all the money. They got it on a Russian a Russian rocket to go up into space and be deployed. And right before Russia, of course, changed the rules to the game, imagine that. And they were like, hey, you can't launch anything off our rockets unless you're an arms dealer. So now it's grounded. And Jordy's like, dude, after all of this, it is not going to stop us. We are going to become arms dealers. How are we going to do it? He convinced Cal Poly to become an arms dealer. No kidding. Fully licensed arm dealer so they could get the CubeSat onto this Russian rocket in order to be flown for the first mission. They get on the rocket. Rocket finally, it launches. It looks great. and then it explodes. Then it becomes this international event. Why is why is American technology on a Russian rocket sent it? And everybody is all freaked out about it. And he's like, well, NASA wouldn't let us fly. They're like, well, that's not going to happen. NASA, you have to let them fly. And of course, NASA Ames steps up and they're like, of course, we'd love to have you, which we wouldn't before, but sure. And so they fly them into the next launch off the shuttle. It's up into space and it launches, goes out the tube and the communications array, and it dead. It's out there. They don't know if it got deployed, if it cracked up on entry. They don't know if it's out there. They don't know anything. They're like, well, that was a waste. They're devastated. Amateur radio operators from around the world start painting it. They had more telemetry data of this little sucker all over the world. It was a huge NASA mission success. And the reason that CubeSats are successful today, and there's so much that is happening with CubeSats everywhere, is because of amateur radio. So when I'm fangirling over him, he's fangirling over me. We were like, it was the weirdest thing ever. It was so much fun. So he's going to write a book. You guys all need to buy it because it was so neat. And I know there's way more to that story, but I had to share. I'm sorry, way too long. Another thing I just wanted to let you guys know, because I want to brag a little bit. Amateur radio, the AARL, they have these scholarships for college students that are going to college. I am going back to school later in life. All my kids are grown, and I'm finally going back for my official degree. And so I was told by my husband, you should just apply. And I'm like, dude, it's for kids. It's not for people like me. I'm old. Dude, they're not going to give it to me. All I had to do was write a little essay, told them what I do, told them why I love amateur radio. And they were like, dude, you need a scholarship. And so I was just literally this last month awarded this amateur radio scholarship. I'll be one of the recipients, and I'll be coming out in the October QST magazine for $25,000. I don't know. It's beyond mind-boggling. So there you go. That's me. So at NASA Ames, what all this means, all about NASA is it's all relative, right? We know there's a bunch of turkeys that work at NASA. We're all just a bunch of turkeys. But the coolest part about NASA is, besides these buildings, sorry, diverging just for 1 second. These buildings are like 1920s deco, like original NACA buildings that are still on the NASA Ames site. It's so neat. They still have all of the nomenclature and everything else from the NACA. And you talk about history, like walking through the walls of history, and your offices are in these kind of buildings. It's just remarkable. But back to turkeys. Yes, we're all turkeys. And I just wanted to say, everyone at NASA that works at NASA knows that we keep it all in perspective. Really, if you look at this size comparison from each of these planets, right, and the top one, you can see our blue little marble looks pretty decent size. But then when we get even through our solar system, we're ridiculously small. And then when you keep going out, it just gets worse and worse. There's way more out there. We are like little tiny specks, absolutely tiny, tiny specks. So we just take every day and we make the very most of it. No one gets full of themselves. And I think that's really the success of our amateur radio groups and of NASA and of NOTA and NACA. People work side by side, and there is none of this false bravado that goes in. Everyone is there to help everyone else, and everyone has something to contribute. Absolutely everyone. Even the person that sits on the sideline, they're like, dude, that's not my thing. I have nothing to contribute. Oh, trust me. All of a sudden, you're sucked into the family, and you're a part of it, and then you can't get out. So that's kind of how NASA and amateur radio is all about. So I'm sorry that was so long and that I went on so many tangents, but that is my presentation for NOTA. I hope everybody makes connections with all of the centers the coolest part about this is it's not really a contest where people are firing off to get your contact and get a number and get out. We are only competitive between these centers. It's like, oh God, we're in fourth place. We got to hurry up so we can get back into third. One of those kind of things. But it's really a competition with ourselves. But when you're actually making the contacts, the coolest part is they stop and they talk to you. So we hear the coolest stories from amateur operators that are making contacts with our centers telling us, hey, I worked at NASA way back when I was in my college years, and I did this study for 3 weeks, and this is it was hilarious. It's crazy. And then the connections and the people that you know and what they have met and people that they've stories they can tell. So we get as much, if not more, out of it than the operators that are calling into us. You guys get a certificate and we get memories for a lifetime. So we really appreciate it, and I just want to say thank you. Any questions?
The 20 million gallon pool, was that the same pool that was in? Armageddon. Is that the same pool? Yes.
Yes. This is why I bring my husband. Questions? Ask him. No, I'm just kidding.
The anti-gravity room.
Yes.
They go into, they were playing with the machine that was the drilling machine. Was that the same?
No, it is not the same, but it is based off of the same facility. So most people don't get to see the facility. And that's for a reason. You don't get to know where it's at exactly, and you don't get to know what it exactly looks like. So that's kind of a cool thing, but it is based off of that same thing. Yes, absolutely.
Are the sites publishing their operating schedules?
Yes, on the WordPress site, which is plastered all over this video, all over this presentation. Yes, it's out there. They do self-spotting too. And so they're constantly, and they're constantly trying to one up the other one. So if they're out there, they want everyone else to be out there, and we can't be out there by ourselves. We have back Discord channels that people talk on, and then everyone's on. They're like, no, we need contacts. I got that guy already. And that kind of thing. So yeah, we definitely do a lot of self-spotting and let you guys know. Any other questions?
Yes, perfect. So during these weeks, you'll hear somebody, they'll be doing C2 NOTA, right? Yeah.
Yes, they do. And yeah, special event, NOTA special event. And so,
special event. Okay.
And we repeat it a million times. It's awesome. And then we also do digital modes too. So on the digital modes, sometimes they are able to place it and sometimes they're not. But usually we use, what is that? JT? FTA, but what is the JT call? And so on JT call, if you are using the same software, we can text back and forth. And so I always send a text saying, hey, you've reached this operator for station NA6MF. And thank you for contacting NASA Ames for NASA on the air. And then I give our little website. So it gives me enough space that I can give you that kind of a blurb. And then it's really interesting because then people are like, what? I contacted NASA. And then all of a sudden the conversation's flowing. You're like, dude, I got to tell this other guy, so, that kind of thing. But yes, we do our very best to be able to let people know. And then that's the other fun thing too. We've had people come back to us and be like, dude, I just even in these presentations that I've done here locally in Colorado, which I've done several, I've had people come up to me and say, I went onto the website, I made a contact because I had heard your presentation. And when I looked at my scoreboard, I already had 5 contacts. And it's like, that's hilarious. You didn't even know you were contacting a certain center or doing something, So, you might actually already be out there. So definitely check it out. Any other questions? So there are a ton of slides, one of which, I'm just going to go back here, is another, just a random link. There's tons of links here for you guys to be able to check out a lot of the cool stuff that NASA has. Some of my favorite NASA sites and some of the really neat things that are there. One of which at the top, that first one in white, is the Moffett Field Historical Museum. And that is right there at Moffett Field there at NASA. And you can get to that site. It is by far one of my favorite museums that I have ever been to. And when you come across it, you're like, oh, that's kind of a small little area. I'm not kidding you. It was fascinating. And it's not just because I'm NASA or that I love planes or that it's, all that. They have docents there that walk through and they tell you all these stories that have been there and they were there, for all these years. And it was like a living museum, and it was really neat. And they backed it up with all of the stuff. So it wasn't like going through even an event that you pay and you walk around and there's interactive things that you push buttons and you read or you listen to and you can't hear. These guys are right with you. There's not many people there at a time. And if you're ever in the area of Moffett Field, it's definitely worth it. It's like the best, like $7 of your life, I'm telling you, and you'll be there for hours. It's fascinating. Another really cool site that is my favorite is a second one. It's that NASA Home and City. It's a game site. It was created for kids, but I'm telling you, I've shown it to more adults that love this site. It's amazing. They actually have created this little kind of video game kind of looking area that you can like click on like an airport or click on a hospital or whatever. And then the hospital blows up. And then you're inside the hospital and it shows you all the NASA technology that is around you every single day that you don't even know about. The exit signs, the fluorescent paint that's on the drive on your roadways, your mammograms, dialysis, all of this technology that actually spun off from NASA. When we think of NASA, everyone thinks of space. And I'm telling you, NASA does so much more for Earth than we even do for space. Even aeronautics and everything else. Obviously, aeronautics is the first A in NASA, so we're really big there. But I'm telling you, just in everything, the thermometers, the infrared thermometers, so formal in COVID that weren't around so many years ago, that all came from NASA technology. So if NASA hadn't come up with some of that technology, we wouldn't have today the resources and the things that we have around us. But it is so cool to go in and just kind of hunt around, even in your own home, all the little things. And so I've had more fun with that, with showing adults and things like that, all the spin-off technology that's come from everything that NASA has done. So, and we take really good pride in that because you guys pay us. You guys are our pay. We get paid because you guys pay your taxes, and part of your taxes, that one little part of that penny comes to NASA, and we do so much. And so it's not just space. It's not just billion-dollar pictures that looked out into the atmosphere and, why are we doing this? I'm going to show you. So that's a really great site. Tons of fun things. So feel free to hunt around and play on that forever and ever and ever. So lots of extra stuff.